Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. With us now is former South Carolina Senator and President of the Heritage Foundation, Jim DeMint. Senator DeMint, thanks for joining us today.
Hey Kathleen, it's good to be back with you.
Well, yesterday the Heritage Foundation released its new study warning that the Senate's bipartisan immigration reform legislation would cost taxpayers $6.3 trillion in new spending, entitlements, and social programs. Is the high cost of this legislation reason enough for any conservative or Republican to vote against it?
Well, Congress is notorious for not counting the cost or underestimating the cost of bills they pass. We certainly saw that with Obamacare, where the Congressional Budget Office said it wouldn't cost anything, but it costs trillions of dollars. And now, with all of this debt as a nation, we need to look at the cost of an amnesty that is being talked about in this bill. And the study we released yesterday is an exhaustive study by one of the experts in the field of estimating what social programs cost. The costs are staggering, Kathleen, and our hope is that Congress will consider this cost as they look at this legislation.
A number of conservatives and high-profile Republicans have come out criticizing the Heritage study. Paul Ryan, for example, said the study ignored the economic growth that would be created by immigration reform. Hallie Barbour called the study a political document that was designed to create alarming headlines. Are you surprised by the criticism from the right, and what's your response to it?
Well, a lot of this criticism came before they even saw the report, and I'm not sure that they've read it yet, because if you read this report, Kathleen, it's hard to get around the fact that no matter if there is economic growth, there is no way that it would pay back what it cost to give amnesty to those who are here unlawfully. We feel like at Heritage we're speaking up on behalf of those who've come here lawfully, our lawful immigrants and our American citizens. But the criticism that allowing unlawfuls to become citizens and beneficiaries of our welfare programs, and that's somehow going to help our economy, it's really hard to justify that. For instance, Kathleen, the unlawful immigrants are estimated to make up about 2% of our GDP. The average unlawful immigrant has a 10th grade education, and we found through this study that they take out a lot more in benefits than they pay in taxes. $6.3 trillion over the life expectancy of these unlawful immigrants if they get amnesty. There's no way that any economic growth is going to be greater than the cost here. So I'm encouraging the critics to read the report, and if they've got some different numbers, let's see them. I don't think there's anyone else who has done a study of the cost.
Senator Marco Rubio, the bill's chief sponsor, insists the legislation isn't amnesty now. I know you mentored him in the Senate. Why do you think he says it's not amnesty when most conservatives say that it is?
Well, Marco is a great friend of mine, and I think he's a great senator. We just disagree on this issue. Perhaps he has a little bit more trust in Congress to keep their promises than I do. After being there 4 years, I don't think I can think of one piece of legislation where the Congress accurately estimated the cost or kept the promises in the legislation. And again, I'll go back to Obamacare. We had a lot of promises thrown at us there, and none of them have come true.
Senator Rubio says he doesn't expect the Senate's immigration legislation to pass the House, which is working on its own version of the legislation. Senator Rubio says there would have to be tweaks that would be made to the Senate legislation. Now, lawmakers there say that there will be no amnesty in the House version. Do you believe immigration reform legislation will fail this year because of the fight and differences over amnesty?
Well, I hope we'll have immigration reform, and the House seems to be moving in the right direction by taking this piece by piece of looking at how to reform our immigration system in a way that actually helps Americans, particularly those who've come here lawfully for opportunity. If our immigration system will help increase those opportunities and improve their salaries, then it's doing what it's supposed to do. But amnesty, we know, will hurt lawful immigrants and all Americans who are paying taxes.
Former President Clinton says the legislation should get 70+ votes in the Senate. With that many votes, the legislation wouldn't be immune to a filibuster. Should the Tea Party troika, Senators Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and Mike Lee, who've been amongst the most vocal critics of the legislation in the Senate, should they filibuster?
Well, it really depends on the public in this case. I believe if people have the time to find out what's in this bill, that they're going to call their congressmen and senators and tell them to vote against it. That's what happened in 2007. That amnesty bill started out with over 70 votes, but it ultimately failed because people found out what was in the bill. This is a bill that's more than 800 pages, that's got a lot of things in it that aren't being advertised, and if you look at the cost alone, I think most Americans will decide this is not the way we need to fix our immigration system.
Several Democratic leaders have said that if Congress doesn't reach a comprehensive deal this year, that the president will act on immigration reform by executive order. He has a record of doing this. It's been reported that he's poised to take steps on immigration reform without congressional approval. Does this strike you as constitutionally allowed, and how can Heritage and other conservative think tanks play a role in exposing President Obama's arbitrary use of power?
Well, the president has not been encumbered by the Constitution or a lot of our laws, and I think if he does something that's obviously unconstitutional, it's something we'll probably have to appeal through the courts, because the Democratic-controlled Senate is not going to act, and we've seen that in the Labor Review Board, where the courts had to come back and say that the president unconstitutionally appointed people to that board when the Senate really was in session. So I don't know what we'll do, but the president is clearly testing the limits on the constitutionality of his decisions.
When it comes to immigration reform, what grade would you give President Obama for his leadership in this issue?
Well, he promised that he would do that, and he had the votes when we had a supermajority in the House and the Senate, and he didn't take any action on it. It appears that what the president wants to do is distract from the big issues of how do we get our economy going again, how do we fix our entitlement system or reform our tax code so our businesses can be competitive. Instead of dealing with those important and difficult issues, he is bringing up one emotional and divisive issue after another to try to split the Republican Party and really split the American people. He's pretending to be the benevolent referee in all of this, but it's a long way from being a leader. I would hope the president would look at what we need to do to get our economy back in shape so that more jobs will be created and more Americans can improve their standard of living.
Senator DeMint, the last couple questions for you are on a separate issue, beginning with Benghazi. Whistleblowers are expected to testify in hearings tomorrow. Do you believe their testimony will confirm that the Obama administration not only handled the situation poorly, but also covered it up a la Watergate?
Well, I hope we can get to the truth here. There's something terribly wrong with the Benghazi situation. I was in Congress 14 years, in the House and the Senate. I had a lot of classified briefings, and never had I felt like the intelligence people didn't tell us the truth. Sometimes they didn't give us as much information as I wanted, but it wasn't until the Benghazi briefings that I began to feel like, and I think it's been verified, that the intelligence people were not telling Congress the truth. That's deeply distressing to me. Now, that's not something I can prove, and I'm not making that accusation. It's just the sense I had when the stories kept changing that they were covering something up. I hope it's not true. I hope the truth will come out and that it will prove that something else occurred. But I am terribly concerned about what happened in Benghazi, and I'm more concerned, or at least as concerned, about what happened afterwards in the White House.
Finally, Syria. There is growing evidence the Assad regime is using chemical weapons in Syria's civil war. In your view, has the red line drawn by President Obama been crossed, and how should the U.S. proceed here?
It appears that the red line has been crossed. It's hard to determine what to do at this point since the administration has not led from the beginning. I think that's created more instability and invited other countries such as Iran to get involved with this conflict. So now the situation is so out of control and the rebel groups are so diverse and unpredictable, it's hard to determine how we can get in and help. but we do need, we need to make sure that we make it clear as a country that we're going to defend Israel, that arms cannot ship from Iran through Syria to Hezbollah, that we've got to protect our allies. Other than that, I think creating safe zones, allowing the folks in Syria to get out of the line of fire, I don't know much else we can do now that the President has allowed the situation to deteriorate so far.
Senator DeMint, if folks want to learn more about your immigration cost study, where can they go?
Heritage.org has the complete study as well as the executive summary, and I can assure you, if people read the study that Heritage has done, and it's very readable and understandable, the only conclusion you can draw is that these costs are far too great if we move towards an amnesty solution here. We don't have to have amnesty in order to fix our immigration system. That's the false choice that we're being given by some politicians now. We need to fix the system first and then determine what to do about those who are already here.
All right, Senator Jim DeMint of the Heritage Foundation, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Kathleen.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.